I'm calling for an impeachment of Trump based on human rights violations at the border and a clear racist bias against Muslims. It's clear as day, but Democrats won't go that far. Why? Because Democrats have done that too.
Ian Schlakman, welcome to Green on Nothing.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. So you are a Green Party presidential candidate. Mm-hmm. So far I've had Howie Hawkins on the show, and I'm hoping to have all of the Green Party candidates understand that there's 5 running.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's quite a few running. Should be a great presidential primary.
So just introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers. Who are you? How long have you been active in the Green Party, and why are you running for president?
Sure, it's a great question. I got started with the Green Party back in 2014. I ran for Congress against my congressman in Maryland, Dutch Ruppersberger. Dutch Ruppersberger was head of the Intelligence Committee. He's a Democrat. And Edward Snowden was actually someone that, he moved to Hawaii, but Edward Snowden, but he would be considered coming from Dutch Ruppersberger's district. So Dutch Ruppersberger famously called Edward Snowden a liar when he leaked all of the information about what the NSA was doing. So as a IT guy and a cybersecurity guy, I was very offended. I got involved in my local Green Party. They said, why not run against him? I said, that sounds like a great idea. And I got to debate him on stage. And he corrected me and said, I didn't call Edward Snowden a liar, I called him a traitor to our country.
Okay.
And I said, he's a constituent of yours. You should be listening to what he has to say, whether you like it or not. He has a right to be heard. And he is clearly telling you some terrible things that are happening behind the scenes at the NSA. And this pro-spying Democrat, Dutch Ruppersberger, just stood by him. But what's interesting to me was that while I was at this debate with Dutch Ruppersberger, I started talking about some other Green Party policy platforms, such as not destroying the environment or basic income guarantee, and he had no idea what we were talking about, just none. He literally said something to the effect of, oh, Social Security is just for seniors, why would anyone need money before that? I mean, just so out of touch about the economic reality the younger people are facing today. Well, everyone's facing today. The middle class is dying, as simple as that.
Right.
And don't even get me started on what's going on with the poor. So from there, I became very active with the Green Party. I could see that these policies really resonated with people. A basic income was a big one with me, and I wouldn't know about that policy unless I worked with the Green Party. So from there, I got very involved. I was the Baltimore City co-chair at one point, Baltimore City treasurer. Then I went on to run for city council in Baltimore. We lost that race for city council, ran a really, really good race, came in second in a 4-way race. But right after that I said, okay, we gotta go smaller. That election year, so if you don't know what happened in Baltimore, basically a young man named Freddie Gray was given what the Baltimore City Police call a rough ride. And a rough ride means you're thrown in the back of the van, totally handcuffed, unable to move. And as they bump around the city in its terrible pothole streets, and his neck was severed, and he died. Baltimore City Police took no responsibility, and of course there was a massive, what we call an uprising, because people were angry, and we needed answers.
Right.
So, just so happens that year that a ton of city council folks that have been on there forever, some of which the extent of their political participation on the City Council of Baltimore was, you know what? I'm here to serve the mayor and the pleasure of the mayor, and I'm never here to investigate anything.
Right.
Finally decided, people are really angry at us. A majority black city's really pissed off. I'm a black politician. Maybe it's time that I get my butt off this City Council and do something else. So a lot of turnover occurred, but then we learned that the new price for a City Council seat was $100,000. Almost everyone that won that year wound up raising at least $100,000. We raised quite a bit. The Green Party was a very big help in that, but it wasn't enough. So we went down ticket, said, what's a smaller seat? There's no elected school board in Baltimore City. Baltimore City has an appointed school board, despite every other county in Maryland having a elected school board, which is another racist practice, because it's a majority black city, I guess. The governor thinks they can't handle their own business. For me, we looked at what's called a RAB board, and this is this housing board position, where basically a little known fact, if you want to make change to a local public housing project, you need to get the support of the RAB board. You can't shut down a public housing project. You can't even change the paint color without getting the approval of the RAB board. And the RAB board is a tenant council-driven board. The tenants have a right to be on that board. So a friend of mine at the time, Reverend Annie Chambers, who supported me when I ran for city council, I then went and ran her campaign for RAB board delegate, and she won. And she won despite the city of Baltimore playing every dirty trick possible against her. You're talking, they sent out notice to the residents of the public housing project, Douglas Homes, telling them the wrong date for the election. The election was held between the hours of like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., so anyone who's working has no chance of participating. They put signs out pointing the wrong way for the polling place, literally saying go this way, and just goes to nothing. And then when we found out on the day of the election that her opponent was inside the polling booth, literally cheering people to vote for them. So of course we got other Greens involved. Popular Resistance was involved with this as well, another pro-Green Party outlet. We marched down to City Hall. We said, this is outrageous. You need to fix this immediately. And halfway through the election, they fixed everything up. And the second half of the election was a fair election that day. And we were pulling people at the bus stop as they were pulling young fathers, pulling their kids off the bus, telling them, there's an election today. Go home and get your lease and come back and vote for Annie Chambers. She's going to bring your playground back. She's going to help with the crime in the community. This is your chance. And they said, I had no idea, but I'm coming back with my lease. You know, so it was a real win for us in the Green Party because she won that election. And then just recently, we actually got our second Green elected to a RAB board in Baltimore City. So now we have another Green elected there as well. And these people actually go and they fight Donald Trump's HUD, Ben Carson administration. So when Ben Carson goes with a scheme with Donald Trump to raise the rent 3 times or to charge utilities where there was no utilities charged before, Reverend Annie Chambers and now Anthony Williamson can actually fight it and say, no, we don't approve this new budget, kick it back, and try again.
That's great.
It's amazing. And something I'm really excited about in this campaign is we want to go city to city and make sure everyone knows that if you have a public housing community in your neighborhood, you are entitled to a RAB board delegate. We want to make sure that you know how to run and win. Because this is what we think the Green Party should be about. My campaign is fundamentally about the Green Party doing the down ticket and community-driven work. So when we do community-driven work, like actually helping folks that are election suppressed, like those in public housing projects don't even know they're entitled to representation,
right,
by taking Green Party folks that are out there that are good on all different variety of issues that our platform has, and saying, here's something in your neighborhood happening now, let's fight it together. And enabling those poor folks who are in public housing to actually take control of their neighborhood, everyone wins. The Green Party grows, we grow our base, and on top of that, we actually win some elections as a party, which is very important to me.
Definitely. So this is the primary reason that you're running for president, is to kind of spread this message.
My primary reason is to grow the Green Party. It's really important to me that we actually win down-ticket elections. I did a lot of work. I was one of the first folks that was given a DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, endorsement in 2016. So, the DSA was large way back in the day, and then it became tiny, and now it's very large again. So what do we see? We see in a very short time frame, 2016 to 2018, 2019, early 2016, late 2018, going from almost no political clout to having a congressperson. I strongly believe that the Green Party could take that growth route. I strongly believe that if we start local and small, build our base at the grassroots level that we're already at, and then keep on going up to state, from county to state, then to the House of Representatives, then we'll be a political force. But as of right now, we're still too small, we're still struggling. And I really want to make sure to run because I want to make sure people understand that we have an opportunity to grow this party from the ground up. We already know the path to do it.
When Jeffrey St. Clair was on the Counterpunch podcast, I heard a really interesting idea that they were floating. And they were saying that the Green Party should really do more community activism and do local gardens and do sort of like a Black Panther type model where you're actually helping people at a local level. Do you think that that's something feasible that the Green Party actually could do, or is the Green Party still too small to do that?
No, not at all. I think we could easily do that. So, Reverend Annie Chambers, and she'd be the first person to tell you, is a former Black Panther, which is one of the reasons I wanted to work with her. She's a former just tell me because I'm not going to get this right, Communist League member back in the 60s, Black Panther, and National Welfare Rights former president. So 3 very distinct organizations. But the Panthers have a legendary legacy of doing that base level of support and groundwork. And she's going to watch this video and she's going to say, I'm not a former Panther, I'm still a Panther, because she's still out there fighting in her late 70s. And that's the kind of work that she does, that's the kind of work that she introduced me to. So, over in Douglas Homes in Baltimore, you'll see us out there doing a food drive. You'll see us out there helping people with rent situations. All the time, someone's got a rent situation. And oftentimes it's not for a lack of payment. Oftentimes it's the city and the housing board just losing payments. The housing board for a while was actually sending payments. So if you had to pay your rent, you would have to get a pre-marked envelope and send it to a penitentiary in Western Maryland, where prisoners for slave labor wages would process your payment.
Okay.
How often do you think payments got lost in that system?
Probably a lot.
All the time, all the time. So finally, she repeatedly went to rent court, and the judge finally said, this is clearly an epidemic problem in the housing community, and I don't want to see Reverend Chambers or the tenants of Douglas Homes back in here until you fix this Housing Authority of Baltimore. And she was pivotal in that fight. And I like to think I had some small part in going to rent court with her and working with them. So that's the kind of grassroots work that we have to keep up. There are a lot of good Green parties are doing that throughout the country. I don't have any doubt in that at all. I think we're beyond the part where we're doing, good activism work like that, like we've done in Baltimore, Feeding the Homeless Project with a good friend of mine, Bonnie Lane, feeds thousands of people each year, a very, very large citywide event. Also ran for delegate herself. I think the next step is to show that we're going to have a serious, grassroots, grounded effort in areas that have been traditionally Democrat to the point where they are one-party rule. And we're going to take the lowest level office, or we're going to start there, and we're going to build upwards. That, I think, is the next step for the Green Party. And, you're not going to have the community on your side, you're not going to have that community trust unless you've been doing work throughout the entire year.
Right.
That's a very important component, and I like to make sure people know that all the time. But that could also mean helping them with lawyers or legal fees, or just showing up in court. I mean, I'm just gonna be very honest with you about what happened in Baltimore, because I feel like your audience needs to know about this. When we would show up in court, just I wouldn't even have this jacket on. I just have this outfit. When we would show up either not in court, but at the Housing Authority office, they would immediately turn to Reverend Chambers and say, Reverend Chambers, you could have kept this between us. You didn't need to bring in these white lawyers. Look at all these lawyers you got with you today. And we would just stand behind her and just back her up. And they would just assume that we're lawyers and we're high-priced and we're powerful. And, we tell them we're with the Green Party, and they say, oh, God, she's got Green Party lawyers with her again. And they clean up their act. They clean up their act. Because, communities of color throughout the country are under attack. And it's not until well-meaning white folks actually put their skin in the game. We're seeing this a lot right now with the ICE raids, with the Jewish community, which I'm so proud of, standing up and standing outside ICE detention facilities saying, you're not going to take one more person in or out of this facility. We're going to try to shut this down. That's the kind of level of work that we have to do to bring about that kind of cross-class support, intra-racial support. And there's never been a better time. Trump is a great catalyst to get some of these issues on the table. But I think the next step is to identify where the one-party system has completely failed. And in Baltimore City, we've definitely seen that. And we want to continue that example throughout the country with other one-party areas.
I think the challenge is, though, you know, and it's just typical for the Green Party and probably any party that's ever run left of the Democrats, is that you're going to be demonized as a spoiler, and you know, we saw it happen to Ralph Nader, we saw it happen to Jill Stein, and I think that's just kind of a permanent problem, isn't it? I mean, the media is going to demonize, going to ignore you, and if they do pay attention to you, they're going to demonize you. And the Democrats are going to say, don't vote for them because a vote for the Green Party is a vote for the Republicans.
Right. Yeah, it is a common problem, but first of all, I think we need a presidential candidate that's very honest about our chances of winning the election. Now, there could be a major scandal. Last time we had a major scandal in the Democratic Party that basically, in my opinion, that DNC email leak scandal was so bad and painted Secretary Clinton's campaign in such a negative light that I think it really hurt her campaign to the point where she lost the election. You could easily have that with Donald Trump on the Republican side. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I mean, 1 or 2 leaks that they're probably saving up for the election anyway, I think could easily come out and you could see record low turnout at the polls. And I know this is going to sound weird because everyone's talking about we got to get Donald Trump out of office, but I think there could be a really, really powerful leak because it's just 2 major parties. If the 2 major parties are shown to be corrupt through another hack, through another email scandal, through another leak, you could see the end of it within a couple days. That's my personal opinion on it. So I'm not saying it's impossible for a Green Party candidate to win, but barring that sort of event, I don't intend to win the election, and I'd just like to be very clear about that. The media repeatedly only has the presidential candidate on. Every single time the Green Party runs, the presidential candidate will get on some mainstream media sites, some mainstream news, CNN, Fox, that kind of thing, and they'll be put on, and they'll be asked, why are you even here? Well, you called them to come on TV, but I guess the first thing you want to do is make fun of them. Okay, we get it. So I feel it's very important that when we do get that spotlight, that we put it right back down on the good work we're doing at the grassroots level. And be very honest with the American people to say, if there is a one-party system in your town, Republican or Democrat, you need to contact the Green Party. We need to come into your area. We need to get to work right away. Because it's not democracy. The Green Party and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party routinely just carve up different areas of the country. We see it in Maryland all the time. And you just say, this is your half in the conservative area, this is your half in the liberal area, have a nice day. And there's no interest in actually fighting for what's important in the area. You know, we just, in Baltimore, we had 2 mayors in a row now in different scandals. The first one was caught stealing gift cards earmarked for the poor, gave it to herself. The next mayor was caught in a massive scheme, which is essentially bribery, saying if you buy my children's book called Healthy Holly, put it in your massive libraries of Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, and other schools, you know, I'll give you some favors when I get into office, because these public institutions can't donate directly to the campaign, but now they could do some kind of quid pro quo back and forth.
Right.
So guess what had happened in Baltimore? The mayor's gone, FBI raided her house and her office, but all those institutions are still there. Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, the school system. Where's their negative consequences? Where's their, you know, day in court?
Right.
When's our justice? All those institutions that are still threatening the city and causing gentrification and kicking out poor working class black families that have been there for years, no consequences to them at all. So this is where the Green Party really has a solid chance to grow.
It just begs the question, though, because when you're talking about building the party at a grassroots level, and again, if you look at the history of how the mainstream media demonizes the Green Party, specifically through the presidential nominee, and specifically through Ralph Nader and Jill Stein, why does the Green Party even run a president? Why doesn't the Green Party just build up at a local level and not have a presidential nominee?
There are some states that require that we run a presidential nominee. It was like when I ran for governor, I had to run for governor in Maryland because if we got over 1% in that election, we would be back on the ballot. a lot of states require this run at a higher office to get ballot access completely throughout. You know, if to that I'd say the laws and the rules governing that rest solely with the institutions that are actually in power, Republicans and Democrats. So if you have a problem with rules like that, you should go to your Republican and Democrat and talk to them about why they're not doing more to support things that would make the Green Party, that would support more independent elections, such as ranked choice voting, such as but Jill Stein actually calls for a National Election Integrity Emergency Act, where you would actually have independents redoing the way we do elections in this country. Ranked choice voting would be a big part of this. Proportional representation, that's the word I was trying to think of, will be another big part of this too. Also like open source voting machines, paper ballots. Like there's a number of initiatives right now that we could do immediately. But ranked choice voting is clearly one of those where if they wanted that off the table, if the powers that be wanted it off the table to stop calling the Green Party a spoiler, they could do that tomorrow. So, my party has to grow. I have to get as much information about my party out as I possibly can. And that means taking every opportunity to do so, which means taking that presidential nomination. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, if I'm the presidential nominee, almost all of my time would be spent working with down-ticket candidates in winnable races, getting them media attention, working with them to grow the party. I mean, while I've been running this campaign, we actually got a second RAP delegate elected to public housing in Baltimore City. That's part of our job. That's part of what we do.
Definitely.
We're going to keep going in that direction. But unfortunately, I think if we were to, I think you'd have to ask that question to the media organizations that have us on only when we run the top of the ticket, or the folks in Congress and the Senate about why they're not changing the laws to make it so there are no spoilers in the system.
On a personal level, I have to wonder too, just again, because you saw, Ralph Nader in particular is an interesting case because he was such an acclaimed figure in liberal media. Back in the 70s, he hosted Saturday Night Live. He was well regarded up until the 2000 election, where after the fact he just was crucified by the media. And you saw that again with Jill Stein recently, and all the accusations that she was working for Vladimir Putin. So just, looking at those two examples, why would you even want to be the Green Party nominee, running the risk that you are going to be branded by the corporate media forever as the person who helped re-elect Donald Trump?
It's a great question. But it's simply a fiction. It's a complete fiction. I personally counter that argument every time by saying, when the email scandal broke, and the emails were verified because they were never really contested that they were actual emails that went out to the DNC, from the DNC into the Hillary campaign, the mantra wasn't, okay, time to vote for a third party. The mantra was, well, third parties still don't matter, even though there's this massive scandal that shows the Democratic Party is corrupt.
Right.
So in that scenario, I think that the corporate media won the day. And I think that most people, I heard it in my own family, would say to me, well, I still only have two choices, and now I really hate Hillary Clinton. What do I do? And I said, please don't vote for Trump. And they went and voted for Trump. It's that simple. When you're saying that when the media is saying only two choices matter, and then you're seeing the corruption in front of your eyes, you're going to vote for the more independent candidate of the two. And clearly Trump was not a political insider, even though he basically supported both parties his whole life to his own business agenda. Most people didn't see it that way. Most people saw it as, well, I saw the corruption on Hillary's side, so now I'm going to go over to the other side. And they don't see the third option. I would love it if for every single person that said, I cannot vote for a Democrat because they're pro, because of their pro-war policies, because of what they've done with drone strikes, because of what they've done to the economy. But I also can't vote for Trump if those people went to me. I would love that. I think they should go to the Green Party. Please come into the Green Party. Because otherwise they won't vote. That's been proven. I mean, Jill Stein's written countless articles about this on her blog. Exit polls have shown this again and again. If you take away that third option or that fourth option or that fifth option, less and less people will vote. It's as simple as that.
Well, you brought up the email scandal, and I just would kind of like to get your thoughts on that, just because the Russia investigation, the Mueller investigation, has hung over Trump's entire presidency so far, and I have a suspicion it's also going to be a major factor in the 2020 election. I mean, there's already plenty of reports out there that Russia's already interfering, and there's hypervigilance on social media. So I just would kind of like your own kind of interpretation of the RussiaGate scandal. Do you think that Russia has interfered in the election? Do you think that they are interfering in 2020? Do you think that they have conspired with Donald Trump, that he's guilty of collusion? Just what's your overall thought on RussiaGate?
Well, so, for me, I work in cybersecurity. I am by no means a elite hacker or anything like that, but I do understand the concepts pretty well. Cybersecurity and the Edward Snowden leaks got me into running for office, because I feel like a lot of Congress people and people in power simply don't understand what's going on with the internet. Now, that being said, I think that, look, let me start by saying this. When I was in school getting my CISSP, which is a Department of Defense level certification, which, gives you some insight into how hacking works and how to harden your systems and all that stuff. One of the things my instructor told me, former Air Force guy, was, is China hacking us all the time? Absolutely. Are we hacking back all the time? Absolutely. Will you ever hear about it in the press? Probably not. But those in the know, those who do cybersecurity professionally, understand that there is constantly bad actors out there on every side imaginable that are attacking one way or another. So that being said, to give you the soundbite answer, I guess, that you're probably looking for, I do not think there is enough proof that definitively Russia hacked our elections to the point where they changed anything. I don't even think that term makes as much sense as people think it does. Putin giving an order to agency to do X specifically, I don't believe that to be the case, no.
It's really hard to even tackle, I think, too, just because RussiaGate is such a big thing. I mean, part of it is, did Donald Trump collude with Russia? Part of it is, did Russia hack into the DNC? Part of it's, did WikiLeaks work with Russia? Part of it's the social media aspect of it. So just, is there any part of all of this that you think is most convincing, or any part that you find particularly dismissible?
For me, I do focus on the cybersecurity side, but I guess, it would be ridiculous of me to leave out decades of history of the U.S. interfering in other elections. I apologize, but I actually wanted to just make sure that I give you correct numbers on this, because I know this is a very controversial issue. So recently, Carnegie Mellon put out a report that basically said there were 114 times the U.S. has interfered in other people's elections, in other countries' elections. 46 times Russia interfered in other people's elections. I think it would be embarrassing on any presidential candidate to say that the sorry, sometimes I really give long-winded answers. I apologize in one of those times. I believe in internationalism, I believe in state responsibility, and I believe in international I believe in international laws. And that makes me a little bit different than I think most people running for office. I don't believe in the typical American exceptionalism policies. So I do not believe that the US should have this extra special policing role where we say to other countries, we're gonna put the thumb on the scale, we're gonna change your electoral outcomes, we're gonna hack your elections, or bring in operatives on the ground through other companies that we can't really trace back to us, and change what you're doing with your elections, but you can't do it to us. Because inevitably they're going to do it to us. They're going to do it to us every day. They're doing it to us right now. I mean, it's totally insane for us to think that we are so special that we should be allowed to go throughout the world and call the shots on other countries, but other countries aren't going to do the same right back to us. I mean, Donald Trump right now a couple months ago, he was literally trying to throw a coup in Venezuela, actually calling the runner-up in an election, or the head of another part of the government, the real president. I mean, I don't know what other data I could give you a little more data. The Clinton administration actually worked to get Yeltsin elected. Yeltsin's one of the people that appointed Putin.
Yep.
The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists actually has an article out that says Israeli spies get involved in U.S. elections as information warriors. I mean, if we're going to just pick and choose the narrative that we want to believe because we believe that, the Five Eyes countries, which are all these different intelligence countries, are all the good guys at the behest of the U.S., and Israel's part of that, and that it's okay for them to be involved in our elections and we can put people around wherever we want. And then we're upset when we get hacked back, or there's not clear globalism that we've helped create, creates an environment where certain agencies can put ads out there anonymously. So I just, it's mind-boggling to me, the mental gymnastics that some folks are doing to put this RussiaGate narrative front and center. And I'm personally offended by it. And if by some miracle I was elected president, it would be on the top of my agenda to work with the UN to create some sort of extra governmental agency at the UN level that would specifically say two things. First of all, a high threshold for hacking. What is hacking? Who is doing the hacking? When is it acceptable to fight back? Do you know right now Donald Trump actually has allowed the Department of Defense to just do offensive cyber measures back? So let's say a cybersecurity firm that wants to make some extra money, on the side, hacks a bank. Let's say it's coming from China's servers or Russia's servers. Now the U.S. Department of Defense can actually say, okay, well, we're going to turn the lights off in a certain building, or we're going to mess with the thermostat, or we're going to turn the hospital's lights off. I mean, this is crazy. And it's going to lead to a situation where we're going to start a war without even knowing it. Because building offensive cyber weapons is pretty much the dumbest thing a country could do, ever. And I'm speaking as a cybersecurity professional. When you learn cybersecurity systems, you want to harden. Defense is the name of the game. And if you're not building defense up into your own systems, you're losing. To have a threat of a cyber weapon out there that could do something terrible to a country or a facility makes no sense, because you don't really ever know where the attack came from. An attacker is not going to just say, I'm going to sit on my home computer with my name on my IP address and DDoS attack you. That doesn't make any sense. Nobody would do that. It doesn't make any sense. So the threshold for cyber warfare needs to be infinitely cranked up. We need to have a very clear understanding with cybersecurity professionals who are independent at a agency that we all trust and we all agree to as international players, such as the UN, that clearly says, we will review the evidence. If the US thinks it was hacked, we will review the evidence. We will ask other countries what they think, and we'll get back to the US and let you know if we think this is credible or not. That is where I think we need to go as an international community. And that little bit I gave you there, sorry for the rant, is sort of my take on a lot of different international issues. The US should not be alone in saying that we feel the government of Venezuela should be overthrown and we're considering military force. Absolutely not. In a Schlakman administration, God willing, we would see strict international norms that we would help create at the UN level that would dictate whether or not we can intervene in another country with the UN at the helm. That is so key. That is so key right there. There's two worldviews, in my opinion, right now. And almost every presidential candidate, with a few exceptions, has the worldview that there's American exceptionalism. And America should just do whatever it wants. And it's the head of a team of allies. And when we go into Iraq, we're the good guys. We're going to defend the people. And then, of course, it never works out. And no one's ever charged. The Obama administration never charged the Bush administration. And I can almost guarantee you, any Democrat that's elected is not going to go back and hold up the Trump administration for war crimes. You know, I can guarantee that to you because right now there are human rights abuses happening on the US border, clearly against children, and no Democrat is talking about impeaching Trump for that.
Right.
I'm calling for an impeachment of Trump based on human rights violations at the border and a clear racist bias against Muslims. It's clear as day. But Democrats won't go that far. Why? Because Democrats have done that too. The Obama administration actually did separate children. They didn't make it as such a strong policy. So when Trump is saying that, he's lying. But, they're not going to go back and hold the Obama administration for war crimes, even though the Obama administration also killed a U.S. citizen overseas with a drone strike. Extrajudicial killings are apparently okay with Democrats, and they're never going to go back and actually punish the Republicans. So this is why all of this should be handled at the international level. Because then there's the realist worldview, which most people don't talk about, but this is the real worldview, is that there are at least three superpowers right now in this country. Russia, in this world. Russia, China, and the US. And those two other ones are coming at us. And they are going to use the tactics that we have used for decades to play their own game right back at us. China was a communist country, had no interest in capitalism. But because the US imposed it and said, this is the way we do things, this is the way we invest internationally, now China's saying, oh, well, we actually have a state-run economy, so we can just throw money at Africa all day. And guess what? The US can't even compete. So we lose every single time when we take this idea that America's the best, and America should be the island nation that should just lead us into war against all the bad guys. No, we need a new international order that specifically says every single country is equal. Every single country should take its case to the UN if it has an international grievance. And that should be the standard, and that should be it right there. There shouldn't be any more of this nonsense about military strikes or Department of Defense activity or cyber attacks. None of this should be on the table.
I think in the case of Haiti, though, that was a UN initiative, right? The peacekeeping force in Haiti, and I think that's led to some humanitarian crisis there as well. So how would you just prevent something like that, or like the Iraq War or something along those lines happening, but under the banner of the United Nations instead of the U.S.?
What's happening in Haiti is absolutely abysmal. I know a little bit about it, and it's absurd. It definitely warrants intervention, but under a Schlakman administration, intervention means appealing to the UN with facts, not just unilaterally going in. I don't think that's the right answer at all. I really don't. Iraq War is pretty clear evidence that we shouldn't be doing that. Same thing with Afghanistan. Afghanistan was supposed to be over and done in a matter of months. If we were to truly rebuild a nation and make it democratic, it's of course going to take an international effort. Of course it's going to take an international effort. It's as simple as that. And the other problem here is that the US has such a strict capitalist mentality and capitalist imposition on these countries. This has been documented time and time again through former intelligence and finance officers that have come clean on some of this stuff. The vulture capitalism we do to some of these countries is crippling and it's permanent. So one of the things that my campaign is calling for is a human rights-based economy. And it looks a lot like socialism, that's kind of the spoiler. But for us, we believe that actually taking human rights elements as the center of the economy, the right to healthcare, the right to housing, the right to food, the right to communications, utilities. All these things are absolutely required in our modern world. So, we're the only campaign that I know of calling for a human rights-based economy, where, that makes us a little bit different. Maybe I was touching on some other questions here, but I'll just go right into it if you don't mind.
Sure.
This makes us a little different than a lot of other campaigns out there, because we're not calling for reforming capitalism. We're calling for moving society in a new direction, a new economy that doesn't just rely on making profit, that actually puts the needs of people, human rights, at front and center throughout the entire world. And I think with that framework going forward and an international willingness to move in that direction, I think you'd see a lot of international problems dissipate that are exacerbated right now by capitalism.
Okay. I guess just on the level of the UN, though, I just wonder how useful it can be, because I know that the U.S., for example, exerts a wide, a strong influence on the UN, especially in terms of funding. I think
That's true.
How do you prevent that, or how do you prevent, the major world powers and the leaders of the major world powers from kind of conspiring against, smaller countries and having a negative effect on them, even under the banner of the United Nations?
Great question. I think what's really important to start with would be to demilitarize the U.S. because the UN right now, the UN has peacekeeping forces through its alliances, not necessarily its own military force. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important that we keep the focus on decreasing American empire. I think the UN, that's not really what I think that the current way that the UN is structured would definitely have to change. But I think the US is the right nation to start the change. Because I think that the US does have a leadership role, but its leadership role could be in terms of human rights, a leadership role in terms of human rights. So if the US was an advocate and a leader for international human rights, I think, and those benchmarks were actually put into place at the UN level and followed, because there's a lot of policies of the UN that just aren't followed. Take example, immigration. There's international law that actually specifies that immigrants have to be treated well, asylum requests have to be heard in a timely manner, they have to be allowed to be moved from country to country, and all that's being violated at the US border. Mm-hmm. So I don't really think it's fair to just say, well, it doesn't work right now. I think what we have to do is we have to have the US be the leader to say, we are taking this seriously. When the UN Human Rights Commission issues an order, we follow that. We don't skirt the law. And on top of that, I also think that's why it's important that we follow international criminal justice law when it comes to human rights violations. So, my administration would be literally taking human rights violations past, and any ones that would happen in the future, to The Hague. To the ICJ. That's a phenomenal difference between us and other campaigns. Mm-hmm. Because if you actually start saying, we're going to uphold a human rights framework through law that we're going to follow in the US, then I think you're going to really see a change in behavior in other countries. That's my take on it.
So if you were on a debate stage with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, would you say that if you were given the question that you would potentially have them prosecuted for war crimes?
Without a doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind. We have no credibility as a country to be. I watch a lot of C-SPAN. Every day there's a new think tank talking about the Chinese threat. Every 5 minutes there's a new one. There's a new summit on it.
Yep.
What the Chinese are doing to some of the indigenous Muslim populations, the Tibetans for years, is a serious human rights violation. But does the U.S. really have a leg to stand on with what it's doing on the southern border? With our legacy of native slaughter and mass migration? If we don't come clean about our own past in the U.S., why are we expecting China to follow suit? I think we've actually shown that we gave China the capitalist doctrine, and they've taken it and moved on it in a way that we didn't think about. But they followed it. They could have said, I don't understand what capitalism is, and I'm just going to go in here with force wherever I want because our population's far larger than the U.S. is and fight us. They didn't go in that direction. So I think we could do the exact same thing with human rights as our centerpiece. But it would involve, I can't think of a good reason not to charge Donald Trump with a human rights violation at this point. And the Democrats, yeah, I think the Obama administration must be hauled in front of the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, for what it's done. They should have been held in front of our own courts for executing American citizens abroad. They weren't. That was a scandal, and it didn't get enough media attention, but a few outlets did cover it, and I'm proud of the ones that did. But we have no credibility on the national stage, and now you're going to see China start doing it with their own drones, unless we say, okay, we were wrong, here's some prosecution on our end, here's people who were in power going to jail, now it's the rest of the world's turn. That, to me, is the only time we're going to have true credibility as a nation.
So just on the subject of international alliances, where do you stand on NATO? Do you think that they serve any purpose, or would you disband NATO?
In its current form, I don't think NATO serves. No, I don't. You're the first journalist to ask me that, and I don't love the question. I'll be frank with you.
Okay.
But I recently, I can say that I don't agree with the Five Eyes Alliance as a cybersecurity guy. I don't think that works, and I think NATO is very similar to that. NATO is really just doing what the U.S. wants it to do. We're basically giving it orders, and on top of that, the couple of different autonomy it does have in the Europe really is just there to stand against Russia, and it's time to just stand all that down. We've talked about universal disarmament, and Joe Stein talked about international treaties on non-election interference. You don't have to go through the UN to do all this. I just have the feeling that if I was the president, or Greens were in charge, had a majority in Congress, either branch, that we would start talking about serious international law and human rights violations. And it's only a matter of time before we need an international body like the UN to start actually weighing in on this stuff, not just the patchwork we have right now. That's why I'm so passionate about that. But you could do it through just treaties. And I think at this point, I don't care how it's done, but a universal nuclear disarmament treaty is absolutely necessary, without a doubt in my mind. In fact, I would go a step further and actually say that we need a universal military disarmament treaty, just carte blanche. Nothing to do with even nuclear. Nuclear could just be a part of it. Because in the US, what's the largest polluter? The Department of Defense, the military-industrial complex. It needs to be shut down. That's not me spouting crazy theories to your audience. That is a scientific fact. We have an X amount of limited time on this planet. If we do not cut carbon emissions, if we do not cut the way that we're using resources to a fraction of what we're currently doing. And any campaign that's saying we could do that without cutting the military is lying to you, or they're just not reading the facts. You have to cut the US military drastically. And then I think that's the perfect opportunity to go abroad and say every other country should make benchmark goals as well to cut their military force back. If we're all doing it universally at the same rate, and it's verifiable by an agency we trust, again like the UN, I think it can be done. But if the U.S. just keeps arguing and holding its breath and saying it's not going to agree to climate treaties or demilitarization pacts, it's not going to go anywhere. The U.S. has to be the leader.
So something else I'd be interested in asking you about, since you work in cybersecurity, is Julian Assange, and he was recently arrested in the UK, taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy. He's being prosecuted for revealing war crimes that happened back in 2010. However, I think that the popular sentiment really turned against him following the 2016 election and the allegations that he was involved in that. So I'd just be curious in your kind of overall thoughts on Julian Assange, both about the prosecution that he's facing and if he was involved at all, or if you think may have played a significant role or may have been working with the Russians in the 2016 election.
Okay, well, I once again apologize, so I got to give you a longer answer for that.
Sure, go ahead.
It's fine. First of all, I want to say Edward Snowden's the reason I got into politics. Absolutely think whistleblowers need to be heard out wherever they are, including leakers. So let's keep going down the list there. Chelsea Manning, now in prison again. Why? Because she won't reveal sources, journalistic sources. Okay. Now we go to Reality Winner, also in prison right now. Hashtag free Reality Winner, because this is getting the least amount of attention of any of the whistleblowers out there. You know, why? Leak something. Once again, handed a document over as a source to supposedly The Intercept. Now, if that's not enough for you, the Julian Assange case, and I have, in detail, gone into some highs and lows of WikiLeaks and some of the things that I think they could have done to better themselves. But I guess I can get to the... WikiLeaks has evolved over the years. WikiLeaks was the outlet to leak information to and to make sure it's anonymized. They've changed, and Julian Assange has a lot to do with that. I don't agree with every step that Julian Assange has taken, and I know some folks have publicly said, who worked for WikiLeaks at one point, they did not agree with it either. That being said, Julian Assange was in the British embassy, the Ecuadorian embassy in Britain, for way too long. His health is absolutely terrible. He was basically tortured. I mean, there's records about this. I'm not just gonna, you know, sit here and spitball stuff. But what's really important to me is that Human Rights Watch itself has come out and said the extradition request for Assange, what they're charging him in America, would be a disaster for all journalists. Every journalist should have their antenna up about this and be concerned about the Assange case. If he is actually found guilty in the U.S., the way that journalists are able to protect sources or do their job or leak information will forever be eroded. We will cease to be a functional democracy. That's not me talking, that's Human Rights Watch talking. So I really feel that this case is underreported. Julian Assange absolutely should be released immediately and treated like, if you want to treat him like a whistleblower, fine, whistleblower protections. If you want to treat him like the international citizen he is, he shouldn't be in America at all, or in England. That's another story. And finally, if you want to treat him like a journalist, which now the government is alleging he is, which you have to ask them why they're putting that in their documents, then he should be given immunity because he's a journalist. Simple as that. I mean, you can't get mad because you don't like what the person is publishing. It was verifiably true. There's no other thing to discuss. So, yeah, I think that all of these cases are related. I think that whistleblowers are under attack, and I think now journalism is under attack because we've let the narrative of, oh, you know, Russian operatives were leaking information and et cetera, et cetera. No, I mean, I completely think that there is no definitive proof of where the email hacks came from at this point. I completely disagree with that narrative. And, you know, I can't say I'm an expert on the DNC email leaks, but I can say the US government has a history of getting intelligence wrong when it comes to leaks. The U.S. government, I was very knowledgeable about the 2014 Sony hacks, and famously, Sony was pissing off its employees. People were keeping passwords in clear text files, and then salaries got leaked along with terabytes of data. And what does the US do? It must be the North Koreans. Obviously it's the North Koreans, because the North Koreans clearly have the capacity to take on Sony pictures. It just doesn't make any sense. Even Seth Rogen said that didn't make any sense at the time. So the US government always goes to a major big bad guy, and the big bad guy du jour is Russia. And the fact of the matter is that if they had 100% solid proof, we would have seen it. I just don't believe they do.
The thing that really sticks out for me in regards to the DNC emails is the fact that that CrowdStrike was the one who said that Russia was behind it. And apparently it seems that the FBI never saw the DNC server and also never even saw CrowdStrike's final unredacted report. So it just, I don't know, to me it seems like part of, like you're saying, the wider hysteria that we saw the example of the Iraq War, where WMD was purported to be there but really wasn't.
Exactly. It's very similar. It's very, very similar. Take that same tactic and move it to the cyber domain. But the problem is that I think you saw recently with Iran, Trump will sit in the Situation Room and ask his generals a question, how many people would this kill in Iran? Oh, 150, sir, some kind of crazy number like that. Oh, it's just an unarmed drone, let's not do this. But he's clearly saying that he's not doing that with cyber.
Right.
He's clearly saying that.
The impression I got was that was sort of the alternative, like, well, we won't drop bombs, but just start doing cyber stuff.
But no, it's worse than that. He actually said, I think in late 2018, he's giving his generals complete self-empowerment to just do cyber offensive weapons. So if the intelligence community, this happens all the time, right? CrowdStrike, the one you just mentioned, we see it happen in Baltimore. All of a sudden, a big cybersecurity firm is involved, and it's questionable how they got involved or what they're even doing, other than bilking the city government for thousands or maybe millions of dollars and not really helping the situation. And what's the other one? New Knowledge, I think, was the other one.
Right.
That was just completely discredited, and actually saw that they were performing experiments in Alabama, basically doing the same thing they were accusing the Russians of doing.
Well, they were making it seem as though Russia was interfering in the Alabama Senate race, even though they weren't.
You can't make this stuff up.
Well, what was embarrassing about that is after the fact they were consulting on NBC News report that was saying that Russia was going to be supporting Tulsi Gabbard's campaign, months after they were already discredited.
Look, it's not too difficult to do. I do encourage people to do it. You can actually read some cybersecurity blogs when some of these things get leaked, and there are people that will analyze whatever they can get their hands on behind the scenes. Sometimes you can't with intelligence because you don't see the final product. But if the product was leaked, such as the DNC emails, most of that was actually just handed over. The Sony leak was definitely the final result. The terabytes of data was just put out there. So you could actually have different cyber experts evaluating, and they don't agree. And as a cyber, I'm not a cyber expert. I'm not claiming to be one at all, but I do follow them, and I could tell when they're conflicted or they're saying, okay, this payload was clearly something that the Israeli government made, but the server that it came from was North Korea. However, the time code was Russian. No one would be so obvious to just stamp something government made and send it off into the world of cyber warfare. You'd be the stupidest criminal organization alive.
I think that in the Guccifer 2.0 metadata, there was something that had the name of the founder of the KGB in there, which would be absurd for the Russian government to place in there.
I heard it was the timestamps, the time zone was back to a Russian server, and there was one Russian server involved. But guess what? Anyone can buy time on a Russian server. Anyone in Russia or China or even North Korea could log into Amazon and buy time on an American server or an Irish server. This is not that complicated to do nowadays. So I feel like we've got to get control of the situation when it comes to cyber warfare, or you're going to start to see very, very quickly escalating things. People aren't going to understand why this is happening because they're not going to take it lying down. If we start disabling systems overseas with Russia or China, I mean, they're going to be angry. I mean, they're going to retaliate. I mean, this is insanity.
I think the challenge is, though, getting to the point of sanity, because on the one side you have the military-industrial complex, these politicians, and then you have these giant corporate media networks that are just pushing nonstop propaganda day and night, repeating the same things. So I mean, Rachel Maddow is a great example, just spreading hysteria every single night. So what do you do to counter that? How does somebody in the Green Party or somebody working at a grassroots level trying to work for sanity, how do they break past that nonstop flow of corporate media propaganda?
Look, the fights are connected at the grassroots and at the top. I think that in cities and counties across the country where you see one party rule of supposedly the good guys, the Democrats, and the fact that there's a reason that I'm a revolutionary, not a reformer. There's a reason that I'm sitting here and saying that we need to revolutionize things. And it's not because I just want to hear the sound of my own voice or I think revolution's great. It's because there's a imperative, urgent need that certain oppressed peoples in this country have known about for decades. Our country was founded on some of them. And now you're seeing at a global level the need for revolutionary action to be taking place. And I think people have a very narrow definition of revolution and what that means, and it's not clear what the next steps are. And I think it's up to us that are not drinking the Kool-Aid of the corporate media to start having that deep conversation of what does it actually mean to revolutionize our economy? What does it actually mean to take a meaningful fight against climate change and maybe not undo it, but actually stop it in its tracks? What does it mean to stop a cyber war or a nuclear war? I mean, I think that you're starting to see some of these conversations break through. I think that these are conversations that we need to keep having, but I think we need to recognize the fact that the institutions that are corporately funded by big pharma or by the military-industrial complex or by the intelligence community. I mean, it's a revolving door of lobbyists and people that work in government and then back out. And that takes place all the way on the streets of Baltimore, all the way up to the White House. And the repercussions are always dire. For that person that's starving right now in the city of Baltimore, and we have thousands of vacant homes that could be redone and reshuffled and renovated and put homeless people in, they're starving right now. Their time of need, their crisis is happening today. But at the national level, where we're not seeing sane conversation about the military-industrial complex, or simply like denuclearization is a really great example, because most rational people would understand that an international treaty to denuclearize would make the most sense imaginable. It should be on the nightly news every night. There should be what I mentioned earlier, the Bureau of Atomic Scientists who do the midnight clock that shows how close we are to basically annihilating ourselves.
Yep.
Point this out repeatedly. All you need to do is denuclearize and time would be halted. I mean, you could literally save the planet. But instead you see the two-party system pointing fingers over and over and over again. And I can tell you right now, that's why I'm running. Because I'm 34 years old. I'll be 35 by the time the election started. I started this campaign at 33. And I'm not seeing anyone else out there that's talking like me. Except for younger folks. Except for younger folks that get it. And that are willing to put their lives on the line and say, we're not going to let this happen. Because it's not about, I could be sitting out there, saving for my retirement. But I genuinely believe, like a lot of other younger folks out there won't be a retirement. Capitalism and the US and the way things are going are not going to survive that long. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has everything to do with the fact that scientists and the international community and those that actually are for global peace are telling us that we don't have that much longer. We can't continue down this path. So it's time for the Green Party to take ourselves more seriously. It's time for us to interject in these conversations, to force our way into the debate, whether we like it or not. It's time for us to grow at the grassroots level and let people that have been thrown to the streets by the Democrats and Republicans, literally, understand that they have a party they can believe in, and then we take that march right to the White House.
So something else that I've been kind of following and find interesting is the trend of social media censorship. And that's actually, it goes hand in hand with RussiaGate a little bit, just because you've had, some channels that have been questioning RussiaGate get demonetized or have viewers unsubscribed.
Yeah.
But this also goes into a wider issue where social media companies are deplatforming people. Stephen Crowder, I believe, was just demonetized, and obviously you have Alex Jones and Gavin McInnes and all these folks. So I just would be curious on your overall stance on if these tech giants should be censoring people, and if so, what their standards should be.
Okay, so So, first of all, I believe you're asking a lot of good questions, I gotta tell you.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
I believe that I firmly believe that if you are spouting hate, that you're making up lies about communities such as the Muslim community or the Jewish community, if you're a conspiracy theorist, that you should not be part of the debate for what has to happen to our planet or our world. I think that's a step too far. Now, look, every single time there's a cry about censorship, I'm sympathetic, but you have to realize that our country is the home of capitalism. So it's not that the government is censoring you, it's the corporate entities that are censoring you.
There can be bleed over sometimes, though, like the Atlantic Council working with Facebook to take pages down.
But that's been part of the process forever. I mean, this is sort of where I really digress with libertarians, because there is no such thing as a free market. If you think there's a free market, I got a bridge to sell you. Like, that's all I can tell you. Like, it's just there's capitalism relies on the government actually weighing in repeatedly and using the force of either the military or the police to call the shots, to say where you can or can't have a business and what it can or can't do. Now, if we had a system of government and economy that actually said, here's how you get all your basic needs met. Here's an information platform, open source, cooperatively run, decentralized, that you can have all the free speech you want on, and then private entities creating certain separate things would be a different structure, and they could do whatever they want. I think you'd be in a very different environment. Sorry if that's hard to follow, but basically what I'm trying to get at is you can't live in a country that says you have to pay to play. You can't, I have to pay my electric bill, I have to pay my internet bill, or I don't get online. And then on top of that, I don't even have net neutrality. So I don't even know what the internet companies are serving me is actually the truth. They could be manipulating the data and sending it right through the internet. You don't know. That is what the government has decided the market can bear. And the government has decided that you really don't have a right to information. If you're too poor to afford a newspaper or the internet, too bad. And this is where I get a little annoyed with libertarians, because I often hear from more conservative libertarians, well,
the poor in the U.S. are the richest poor ever. Everyone's got an iPhone. Everyone's got cable TV.
Right.
Back in my day, everyone was dirt poor, living on a farm. And that's just garbage. That's complete. If you don't have internet, if you don't have a cell phone, you don't have the ability to apply for a job. So that's why I'm completely for rethinking the way the economy is done from the ground up. And that means that we need to put in institutions. We need to have that global, that national conversation that says, what is a right? What information do we all have a right to? Can we all see? Can we all guarantee each other the right to see? Can that also extend to the right to health care? Can that also extend to the right to an education? It should. That is part of our law, but it often is doled out unequally. Can that also extend to the right for housing? Or are we going to keep living in a capitalist speculative market and just see housing prices go up perpetually and never do anything about it? So I don't really think you can have this conversation in a silo and just say, I'm upset because my favorite YouTube guy is now gone. I mean, I'm upset because people in Baltimore don't have a home, and I wish the government would afford it one. And then I might get on board with your train of thought that the government should get out of the way of the internet. But corporations have controlled the internet since the day Bill Gates wrote a letter to the Free Open Internet Society, the FOSS people, basically saying, please let me monetize code so I can sell my products and be a billionaire. Because the internet was not started by entrepreneurs. It was started by folks that wanted to collectively write code, share it across the internet, and build a free society. So those are two very different paths.
So for these giant companies like Google, Facebook, Apple, how would you kind of tackle the issues that they might present? Would you break them up, or would you nationalize them? What's the solution?
Yeah, yes. I mean, the fact that we haven't nationalized them yet is appalling. The fact that we haven't broken them up shows how corrupt we are. It's as simple as that. I mean, there are certain institutions that are just too important, such as journalism. Journalism is too important to just say, well, it's at the hands of the marketplace, and if it fails, it fails. We won't understand what's going on with our own government if we don't have journalists. That's too big to fail, in my opinion. Tech companies will tell you they have all the answers and they're going to internally create policies until that absolute minute they realize they're about to be regulated. So, the internet censorship question is a symptom of a much, much larger problem. We do not have the ability in the US to have ethical debates. We don't have the ability in the US to discuss the latest technology and how it should be used. We just sort of fly by the seat of our pants. I could go on all day. I mean, genetically engineer crops that are designed not to reproduce, but to just die and never reproduce seeds, and then you have to keep buying the crops over and over again. And then those seeds intermingle with the seeds of the heirloom seeds, and then all of a sudden you've got a field full of trademarked information from Monsanto that you now owe money to. We've never had a clear political agenda on what to do with that. We've never had a clear political debate with ethicists, debating this on TV, on the nightly news, like they should be, talking about, should we have designer babies? Should I be allowed to pay extra to give my potential kid genetic advantage, even though poor people will never be able to afford this? We've never had any of these debates. So, I mean, I've seen Alex Jones, and I've watched him, and it's very entertaining, and I'm sympathetic when he's demonetized. But I mean, I feel like there are much, much, much larger issues than making sure flat earthers get back on, YouTube. And I feel like if you were hoping that you'd have a right to permanent monetization on YouTube, you should take a look at the Green Party and our stance on being anti-capitalist and eco-socialist, because I can tell you corporations are not your friend, and they're never going to do the right thing. They're going to do what's best for their shareholders. If their shareholders are people that are talking to the US government and they're upset about fake news, and they define what fake news is, it's all a foregone conclusion.
So I just wanted to ask you briefly about a couple of the other candidates who are running for president. One is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders obviously reinvigorated a discussion in socialism in the 2016 election and is continuing to do that. Jill Stein, after Bernie Sanders lost the Democratic nomination in 2016, Jill Stein actually offered him the presidential slot for the Green Party, which he didn't take, obviously, and didn't respond to. I just am interested, if Bernie Sanders was to become the Democratic nominee in 2020, would you want to run against him? Do you think that might be undermining his movement, or just where do you stand him as a candidate?
I completely understand the and I don't I don't mean to be rude, but I just want to be clear about that. I'm just giving you the answer.
Sure.
As I understand, it's not you personally saying that. A lot of people that say that. Maybe, other than that. But, I mean, if folks think that I am running against the Democrats or the Republicans not paying attention to my campaign. My campaign is about growing the Green Party at the grassroots level. There are millions of people that do not identify with either party. There's study after study after study that says Americans want more political parties. And on top of that, there are millions of people that simply say that they don't vote because they don't feel it matters. And, there's a lot of Democrats where I come from, maybe a Republican where your hometown is, that come out only on election day and pander to the poor, pander to the middle class, and say, we got your backs, and they go off to DC, and they have no interest in the community at all. So I feel the Green Party is poised for a fundamental change. Fundamental change. And that means that we are active in the community, we grow within the community, and we actually create that third, fourth. I'm not just for the Green Party getting ballot access. I'm for all these different parties. We need a multi-party system in the U.S. The U.S. is too important an entity to just have two parties that are prone to failure and corruption. We need a multi-party system. We need ranked choice voting, proportional representation, all these different things. I stand with Jill Stein's call for an emergency declaration on voting rights and access issues. I think that there are good points raised by some Democrats and also by activists like Greg Palast. No, am I right? Yeah, Greg Palast, pretty sure. Who have pointed out for years Republican voter suppression. But I think we've got to work in concert with independents that clearly point out that there's a whole host of issues, that are just pointing us to, when I see the voting statistics, between 40% participation to 60% participation, I know that if we had many, many different parties representing all different kinds of people, working in all different kinds of communities, we would see 90% participation, 100% participation. So that's what I firmly believe in. And that's what I'm doing in this election, because we've got to grow at the grassroots. Can I just answer Bernie Sanders for a second? So, Bernie Sanders is a reform socialist. It's kind of that simple. He is not a revolutionary socialist. I don't begrudge him with his agenda. I think reform socialism can certainly point out some good inconsistencies within capitalism. I think reform socialism can point to some good, short-term goals. But if you don't have someone that's saying, let's revolutionize the system to save the planet, to demilitarize us, to, move us forward as a society, like I am calling for as a revolutionary socialist, I think you're kind of missing the point. And so, right now, we finally have a socialist in the Democratic Party, even though he's reform socialist, bringing up some good points. Maybe in a couple of years we'll have 2 or 3 additional parties with serious candidates actually running for the presidency that are actually revolutionary socialists. In other parts of the world, they have communists running for office, anarchists running for office, pirate party people running for office. I mean, and they all have equal shot with proportional representation systems. So, I mean, this is the world that I want to see. This is the U.S. that I want to grow. So, you know, we're not playing that game. We're not working down that paradigm.
Yeah, a couple of the guests who I've had on this show, you know, they consider themselves to the left of Bernie Sanders insofar as they see capitalism as far as the workplace and the authoritarian nature of a workplace and renting people's time to have them work for you. They consider that akin to slavery. I've had a few people say that on the show: Noam Chomsky, David Ellerman, Richard Wolff. Would your perspective be similar to that? Would you go to the extent of saying that capitalism in the form of paying for somebody's time should be abolished, and that we need to institute a democratic workplace where workers literally own the means of production?
Yeah, I would. I'm all for class solidarity. I've read Marx to the extent that I can understand it. I try not to go too far down the ism hole. But you know, a lot of my good friends out there on the front lines, you know, fighting for either homeless rights or tenant advocacy, or fighting Donald Trump and his Venezuela policy, or socialist of one stripe or another. And I certainly do agree with that. You know, though the profit motive and you know, looking at class and wage, time theft and all that is certainly, you know, an important part. But I truly feel that we can't just say, read Marx or read my favorite guy, or, you know, woman, revolutionary, and then be done. Like, I think it's a conversation we have to keep having. Because I think that the capitalists have done an amazing job of blurring the line as much as possible. So now, you know, you can be an Uber driver. Now you can have your own business. Now you can be a freelancer. What are you in that situation? Do you work for yourself? Do you work for the entity? Are you part of the ruling class? Are you part of the, are you a tool of the working, you know, like it could just go on and on and on. And I feel like a lot of the terms that Marx used at the time, you know, I don't think Marx got it right when he dealt with the extreme poor, or the underclass, or like the thieving class. Like, you know, I feel like, you know, it's up to us this day and age to continue that conversation and to rewrite a new doctrine for the 21st century. And I feel like that's where we're lacking political will. You know, a lot of folks ask me, because Bernie Sanders is a very, very well-known democratic socialist, some would argue social democrat, who you know, and does a lot of work with the DSA, giving keynote speeches there quite a bit. You know, why do I work with the DSA? Well, the DSA is one of the few organizations that I know of where if I go to their annual meeting every 2 years, I will see folks from across the socialist political spectrum, sometimes into the anarchist spectrum, fighting it out on the floor, not with fists, but with words. They'll actually raise their issue, they'll go to the floor, they'll wave their, you know, little waiver, and they'll vote right there on the floor. It's all with Robert's Rules of Order, which, you know, has its history of classist origins, etc., etc. But at least there's an attempt to have multiple, multi-tenancy is what it's called. You know, they have multiple different kinds of groups, socialist and beyond, fighting it out, coming up with the best possible solution amongst themselves. That is the future that I think we need in the Green Party. I want to see a Green Party, you know, not having these small little national meetings, but these massive floor fights, you know, where people are bringing their best, they're writing resolutions, they're meeting other people across the aisle, people that they may not agree with, and hashing it out, and then voting at the last minute and getting their resolutions to the floor. That's democracy in action. You compare, like, the British Parliament to the US system, and you just see how lazy we are in the US. We don't want to stand up and fight and talk about our values and then argue with the other side. I mean, right now, all you hear about from the Democrats and the Republicans are, oh, if only the other party wasn't in power at all. The other party wasn't in power when Trump was in office, and what did they get done? One tax cut bill They couldn't even do the medical pushback they wanted to do from Obamacare. It's a complete myth in this country that if we all just think the same way, and we're all in the same party and all in unity, kumbaya, all the world's problems will be solved, according to my party's ideology. That is a myth. It's that young activist that wants to get out on the floor, argue their heart out, hear the response, and then make resolutions, and then, champion it. That's what's going to push this country in the right direction. That's what's going to be the new energetic electoral force of our day. And I think that you're seeing this more and more and more in every country, more and more and more across the world, across political spectrums. And I can't wait to see a more vibrant debate amongst those on the left of the Democrats, or even people that feel maybe that we should be part of a different. Sorry.
Cool.
Yeah. I can't wait to see if we can move beyond this and actually have this more vibrant debate. Because I think a lot of what I'm talking about is just a lack of setting the terms and the standards of how to debate and how to discuss. Whether it's on the international level like the UN, whether it's on a political ideology level like with the DSA or the Green Party, or whether it's in Congress itself.
Something that Bernie just came out with that I think motivated a lot of younger people was abolishing student debt. Is that something that you would support?
Yeah. The student debt situation is wildly out of control. College tuition should be a right. Higher education should be a right. We shouldn't be arguing about what level of debt relief to give. We should be giving debt relief as fast as we can, to whatever means we can. And we should also be abolishing student loan debt. I'm 100% behind that. But I think that you also have to make sure that college is free, universities are free, and then you have to decide what to do with private institutions that can charge whatever they want. That to me is where the real crux to the problem is. Because you're seeing a lot of people that are kind of like, okay, I'm happy that we're considering getting rid of student loan debt, but what about me if I just paid off my debt? What about my kids if they're going to go to a private college? And we just need to start with a standard, a universal standard. Like we had, we're trying to get universal health care, Medicare for all. We should move to a standard of universal education, education for all, and clearly define it. If it's in a public institution, what are the public institutions? What are the standards? Are there any fees at all? How do we go about this? So yeah, I'm completely for abolishing student loan debt. I just feel like, we'll have to look at a lot of other countries and to see how they operate once that debt is eliminated, and then what are the new standards for having college in general.
Someone who I find to be a really interesting candidate among the Democrats is Tulsi Gabbard, just because she's really the only one who's really focusing specifically on foreign policy.
Yeah.
And her rhetoric, aimed at both neoliberals and neoconservatives, and talking about a new Cold War. I find that in itself somewhat revolutionary. Do you think it would be a net positive if she were to be the Democratic nominee?
I mean, yes. I think that I don't think it needs to be like a partisan answer. I think it just give like a for the safety and planet of the world answer. Would I like it if she switched over to the Greens and helped us grow our party? Sure. But I think that some of the things that she said, and a lot of it I've heard third hand, so I don't want to misquote her, are essentially correct. They are definitely getting to the point that we can't be this universal policeman. We can't be this, this sole operator with our drone strike capabilities, or declaring war throughout the world, or propping up coups and dictatorships. We've got to completely reverse course. Now, it's not the new Cold War. I think that's a great way of phrasing it. Sometimes when I run on a basic income, which is one of my big platform policies, I talk about Social Security for everyone, 18 or up. So I get why she's phrasing it like that, but I just want to be clear that we live in a new global landscape. I don't think the superpowers are settled yet. I think you could see a couple of more superpowers emerge. I think India could easily be the next one. And if the climate crisis continues the way it's going, and India suddenly has climate refugees internally, and they're a nuclear power, that's going to be game changing. I mean, you need a new internationalism. You need a new international body that is universally respected by most states or all states to say, here's how we're going to deal with these new terrifying world crises. Otherwise, every country is going to try to emulate the American exceptionalism ideology, and every country out there is going to become a little U.S. trying to prop up dictatorships in China, trying to prop up dictatorships in Africa, India messing with Pakistan. I mean, these things are going to turn from a Cold War into a hot war instantaneously. And, climate change is definitely putting fuel on the fire.
So, again, the first Green Party candidate who I've had on the show before you is Howie Hawkins, and just kind of the impression I get as somebody who's not too involved with the Green Party is that he was kind of the presumptive nominee, or it was kind of his turn. He's a Green Party founder. He's friendly with Ralph Nader and Jill Stein. Why are you running against him, in the same race or with him?
Well, I think I think Mr. Hawkins has I think he's done I think he's giving off a false impression that he is already the presumptive nominee, and I can tell you personally I'm very offended by that.
Well, I just want to clarify. I'm saying that's my impression.
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm not taking it personally on you. Yeah.
I don't know if he has said anything.
No, I think that you're onto something. I think that he is hinting that he is the presumptive nominee, and it's a shame.
And again, I just want to be totally clear. How has he done that?
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of us have worked with the Jill Stein team and the Jill Stein campaign. I think that's very premature of him to start making those connections. I think that I'm one of the few people that are willing to speak up about this, even though I think some other folks running on the Green Party ticket have been talking about it more and more frequently recently. There's no doubt in my mind that Mr. Hawkins was one of the people that helped found the Green Party amongst a number of other people.
Right.
And we certainly do thank him for that. But as Jill herself will tell you, and as she's told me, she's not running. The field is wide open. So we have a number of very diverse candidates running. I include myself in that. There's, if you don't mind, I'll list a few of them. I list a few of them, I'm going to leave some out. Well, I'll just do it anyway. So, I mean, Siddhanam Curry is running. She's run a couple of other times. She has a very interesting perspective. Dario Hunter is running. Dennis Lambert's running. Reverend Pitney is going to get into the race. There's a couple of people that I don't know personally, and I apologize, but everyone should look them up. And essentially, what a few of us candidates did in the beginning of the race was we signed a joint letter calling on the Green Party to have a verbose and fair and transparent election. And for reasons you'll have to ask him and his team, Mr. Hawkins has decided not to sign that letter. I've recently re-brought this up to their attention over at the Hawkins camp, and their answer was, "Oh, well, we'll look into it again." And I hope they consider signing the letter. I think maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know, but for me, a lot of folks joined the Green Party because they saw the corruption in the Democratic Party, and I need to make sure, as much as I can, that we have a very high standard for not tolerating corruption within the Green Party. Everyone who works on my team is not involved in the internal operations of the Green Party. There are a few folks that work in the Hawkins team that are involved in the internal operations of the Green Party. They're very high-ranking officials on the Hawkins team, clearly listed on the website, and they're also internally involved in some key positions in the Green Party. We have repeatedly asked them to get out of those positions and run a clean and fair race. We don't want the hint of superdelegates or delegates like that in the Green Party. We want to be very clear that everyone who's helping us run our election and our primary is independent-minded and will be open to any candidate winning. And at this point, we are still waiting on some of those Hawkins team members to do the right thing and step back from some of their internal positions. I think you'd have to ask them why they are not interested in signing a pledge to have a fair primary. I can tell you every other candidate, as far as I know, has signed the pledge. And I think we have a very diverse field of candidates. And I think we're going to see that at the debate. And so, I think the Democrats are laughing all the way to the bank with this one. I really do. Because they're showing 2 nights in a row of primetime coverage of their debates, wild diversity of candidates. People don't even know who some of these candidates are. And they're getting wall-to-wall, they're getting wall-to-wall coverage. And if we just say, oh, it's this guy's time, and, wait until the very last couple of months of the race to then have the mainstream media call him a spoiler, we're just, that is completely wrong. It's just the wrong direction to go. We have a massive diversity of candidates running, all different stripes, all different parts of the country, all different backgrounds and ethnicities, and it would be absolutely shameful to just say, oh, we're going to focus on this one guy because it's their time. That's the slogan the Hillary team used, if I'm not mistaken. I got a postcard in the mail in before Hillary's first run saying, it's her time. Literally said, it's her time. I don't know why I'm on a Democratic mailing list, but that's what I got in the mail. This is a very important issue. I'm glad that you raised it, and I hope more people are aware of it, and I hope we have a transparent and open primary.
So at the first debate, are there any specific issues that you hope come up and that all the candidates on stage can debate and discuss?
I do. From what I understand, Jill Stein herself is going to be one of the moderators, so I'm very excited about that. So it'd be great to have a vibrant discussion about RussiaGate, as it's called. I hate that term, but there is. I know that some folks like Hawkins have been very down on Jill about that topic, and I think Jill and I share a lot of the same analysis of the RussiaGate scandal, especially from a cybersecurity perspective. I've talked to her about the cybersecurity angle of RussiaGate multiple times, and I've seen it reflected in her writing, and she's informed me dozens of times about the angle of the intelligence community and how it's going after her, or what's going on next, and it's been a very vibrant discussion. So I hope that gets up in the debates as well. I think that's a really important issue. I also hope that international cooperation, following international law, I hope we can have that vibrant discussion, because I know everyone's not really with me there yet on calling for the UN to be more involved, and for us to use the UN and lean on International Criminal Court of Justice to try some of these crimes. I think some people are still of the age of American exceptionalism and seeing Russia as the enemy and China as the enemy, and I want to have that vibrant debate on stage. I think we could go very far with it. And I also kind of feel, a lot of folks have told me that Jill Stein is a wonderful person. I talk to her all the time. I consider her a friend. I hope she considers the same thing of me. But I'm a socialist, and I think she may shy away from that term a little bit. For me, revolutionary socialism is something that, I want to see discussed more in the party. We are an eco-socialist party. I'm very proud of that. But I think we can do a bit better. I think moving to that human rights-based economy that I talk about is a little bit different than the traditional Green New Deal project that Mr. Hawkins is discussing. And certainly different than what I know some of the other candidates are discussing on the other side, such as Dario Hunter discussing a minority Bill of Rights, if I'm not mistaken, and Ms. Curry talking about her own interpretation of eco-socialism with her experience in Africa. So, having that vibrant debate is exactly what I'm about. I want to see that room packed full of people discussing it on the floor afterwards. That's what I'd like to see. So I hope that's what we see at the A&M.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope I can attend. Seems like it's going to be a great event. It'll be wonderful to get a wide array of perspectives that you don't ever hear in the corporate media. So I'm looking forward to it. Ian Schlakman, I appreciate you joining me for this edition of Primo Nutmeg. For folks out there who would like to learn more and get involved in your campaign, how can they do that?
Sure, head on over to schlakman.com, SCHLAKMAN.com. There's a sign-up form, a contact us form. You can volunteer, you can get more involved. We're building up our army of volunteers every day. We're making dozens of phone calls each day. People are reaching out to us all the time. It's been a really energizing campaign. I think there's a real interest in seeing the Green Party be that true breakthrough party on the left that is truly independent of all corporate ties, to the point where it's actually fully socialist and fully engaged in what's going on in the world internationally. And that's what we've been hearing. So I've been very excited about that, and yeah, appreciate people checking me out.
Yeah, and thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You drove all the way up from Baltimore to be here, so I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we'll have you back at some point in the future.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.